I always believed that raising a child meant teaching them dignity, respect, and the courage to stand for what's right. I didn't know that one day I would sit at my son's dinner table, my own son, and realize he'd forgotten every single thing I ever taught him. It happened on a rainy Saturday evening in Ohio, the kind of night where the wind rattles the windows and makes people's tempers shorter than usual. My son, Mark, had invited me to his in-laws' home for a family bonding dinner. I didn't expect perfection, but I at least expected basic courtesy. I ironed my best shirt, baked my famous cornbread, and drove 40 minutes in the rain, hoping we'd all have a peaceful night. I should have turned back when I stepped inside and saw Cynthia, my son's mother-in-law, looking at me like I was an insect crawling across her marble floor. Cynthia was one of those women who wore pearls even while washing dishes, someone who believed money equaled superiority. She had never liked me, maybe because I raised my son alone, or maybe because her side of the family had money, while I never pretended to be anything more than a hard-working single mother. "Ah," she said, eyes narrowing, "you came." "Yes," I smiled politely. "Thank you for having me." She didn't respond. She just turned sharply and strutted away, leaving me standing there. Her daughter, my daughter-in-law, Amber, gave me a stiff smile and guided me to the dining table. I tried not to let the tension bother me, but every muscle in that house seemed tight. Dinner was served. I sat beside my son, who barely looked at me, too busy trying to impress his wife's family. As plates were passed around, laughter filled the table, except directed at me. When Cynthia spoke, she made little comments like, "Oh, some people aren't accustomed to real etiquette. Some families don't understand fine dining. Some people don't belong at certain tables." Each time she said, "some people," her eyes landed on me. I stayed silent. I had learned long ago that reacting only feeds people like her. But then it happened. Cynthia picked up my plate, stared at it with a twisted smile, leaned forward, and spat right on the food in front of everyone. The table gasped. My fork froze mid-air. My stomach tightened so fast it hurt. I looked at my son, expecting him to stand up, demand she apologize, defend me, do anything at all. But he didn't. He chuckled. Then he clapped his hands. "Mom, relax," he said, almost amused. "It's just a joke. Cynthia's just messing around. Lighten up." Lighten up. My son. My child. The boy I raised through sleepless nights and double shifts. The boy I defended in schoolyard fights. The boy I taught to respect women, elders, and himself. The boy who used to hold my hand when crossing streets now applauded a woman spitting on my plate. Something inside me cracked, not loudly, but sharply, like glass under too much pressure. I pushed the plate away without saying a word. Cynthia smirked triumphantly. Amber avoided eye contact. The rest of the family laughed awkwardly. I felt like a stranger, like an intruder in a home where my son now belonged more to them than to me. For the rest of dinner, I didn't speak, I didn't eat, I didn't react. And maybe that scared them more than if I had yelled. When the meal ended, Mark patted me on the shoulder. "Mom, don't be dramatic," he said. "We're family now. You need to adjust." Adjust. To humiliation? To disrespect? To being treated like dirt under someone's shoe? But I didn't argue. I didn't complain. I simply smiled softly and said, "Of course, dear." Then I left. But that night, while the rain kept hammering against my windshield as I drove home, a different kind of storm grew inside me. My son needed a lesson, one he would never forget. Not out of revenge, but because a parent's job doesn't end when a child grows up. Sometimes the most painful lessons are the ones that finally open their eyes. And what I did later, what I did that night, shocked him so deeply he couldn't even speak.
I didn't go home immediately, not after that dinner. Not after watching my son, my own flesh and blood, clap for a woman who spat on my plate. Instead, I drove aimlessly through the rain, letting the wipers battle the storm, while my mind tried to steady itself. I wasn't angry in the loud, explosive way people expect. No, this was a quiet anger, the kind that sits in your chest like burning coal, steady and unforgiving. My phone buzzed twice, once from Mark, once from Amber. Both messages said the same thing. You left too early, you made things awkward. Imagine that. Apparently, their embarrassment mattered more than my dignity. By the time I reached my small house on Maple Street, I knew exactly what I needed to do. Not revenge. No, I didn't raise my son with revenge in mind. What I wanted was respect. And sometimes respect has to be taught the hard way. I walked inside, dropped my keys on the counter, and went straight to the living room. My son had forgotten everything I taught him. Maybe life had made him arrogant. Maybe his new in-laws' wealth blinded him. Maybe Amber's family had slowly reshaped him into someone who believed he belonged above me. But if he had forgotten who I was, it was time to remind him. I opened the old cedar chest I rarely touched. Inside were things I had saved from the decades of raising him. Mark's childhood drawings, school awards, photos from days when he used to hug me without hesitation. I picked up a faded picture. Mark at 6 years old, grinning with missing teeth, holding my hand at the county fair. On the back he had scribbled in clumsy handwriting, "Mommy is my best friend." I sat down on the couch and let the weight of that memory rest on me. Somewhere along the way, that little boy had disappeared. But I knew one thing. He needed to remember where he came from. So I spent the next hour preparing something very specific, something personal, something emotional, something he couldn't ignore. I gathered old letters, handwritten notes, photos, his first school project, even the hospital bracelet from the day he was born. And then I wrote a letter. A long, carefully crafted letter describing things I had never told him out loud. Things about sacrifices, about nights I worked triple shifts so he could attend a better school, about meals I skipped so he could eat, about dreams I set aside so his dreams could grow. By the time I finished, my eyes were burning, but my heart felt calmer. Then I placed everything, photos, letters, memories, into a plain brown box. On top, I added a note, "Open this tonight, alone." After sealing the box, I grabbed my coat and stepped out again. The rain had softened into drizzle, but the night still felt heavy. I drove back to Mark's house, quietly, slowly, knowing they would all be asleep by now.
His house sat in a tidy suburban neighborhood, the kind Cynthia bragged about constantly. I parked across the street, grabbed the box, and walked up the driveway. The porch light was off, but I knew exactly where he kept the spare key. I'd given it to him when he was 12, telling him, "A key is a responsibility, not a toy." Ironically, he had forgotten the lesson. I didn't use the key. I didn't need to go inside. Instead, I set the box down gently at the front door and slid the note under it. Then I stepped back and stared at the house my son now shared with a family who thought spitting on a plate was appropriate entertainment. Before leaving, I sent him one text: "Check your front door. Do it now." Then I drove away and parked a few houses down. I didn't want to confront him. I wanted him to confront the truth. 5 minutes later, the porch light flicked on. Mark stepped outside wearing sweatpants and confusion on his face. He picked up the box, looked around the street as if expecting me to be standing there, then went back inside. I watched the silhouette of his figure moving around the living room. I saw him sit down on the couch. I saw the flicker of soft light as he opened the box. I could imagine the photos spilling into his lap, the old drawings unfolding like memories he had tucked away too tightly, the letters trembling in his hands. Then I saw his head bow. I saw him wipe his face. I saw him stop moving altogether. Good, because that was the moment he finally remembered who I was. That was the moment the man who applauded humiliation realized the depth of love he had taken for granted. But he didn't know this wasn't the end. He didn't know I had something else planned, something deeper, something that would confront not just him, but Cynthia and the entire in-law circle who believed I was beneath them. And the next day's events, those would shake the entire family to their core.
I didn't sleep that night. Not a wink. I lay awake replaying the dinner, the spit, the laughter, my son's applause. But somewhere between midnight and dawn, the heaviness inside me turned into a calm resolve. Last night, I reminded my son who I was. Today, I would remind everyone else. At 8 a.m. sharp, my phone rang. Mark. I let it ring twice before picking up. Mom? His voice was already tight, already trembling. Can you come over, please? Why? I asked gently. I need to talk to you. I need to see you. I paused. All right, I'll be there. When I arrived, the first thing I noticed was Mark's eyes, red and puffy, the way they got when he cried as a child and tried to hide it. Amber stood behind him, unsure and timid, as if she knew something was about to shift in the house. Mom, Mark whispered, voice cracking. I didn't know. I didn't realize. I know, I said softly, but that doesn't make it okay. He swallowed hard, nodding. I'm sorry. Your apology isn't for me alone. I said past him. Where's Cynthia? Amber tensed. She's in the kitchen. Perfect. I walked straight toward the kitchen, my son trailing behind me like a child afraid of losing his mother again. Cynthia was pouring coffee, dressed in her usual perfection. Pearl earrings, silk robe, hair curled as if she woke up in a magazine photo shoot. She looked up at me with surprise. Oh, you're back. Yes, I replied calmly. We need to talk. She lifted her mug slowly,
like a queen adjusting her crown. About what? I set my bag on the counter, opened it, and took out one single picture. The photo of 6-year-old Mark holding my hand at the county fair. I placed it in front of her. She frowned. "What is this?" she asked, annoyed. "A reminder of who I am, of where my son came from, and of which you disrespected last night." She scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Oh, please, you're being dramatic. It was a joke." "No," I said firmly. "A joke is funny. Spitting on someone's plate is an insult. Encouraging my son to belittle his own mother is abuse. And believing your money makes you better than me?" I leaned forward slightly. "That's delusion." Her eyebrows shot up. "Excuse me?" "Let me be very clear, Cynthia," I said, my voice steady and controlled. "You may have money, you may have status, you may have a table set with fine china and crystal glasses, but none of that gives you the right to disrespect me." For the first time, she opened her mouth, but no words came out. Amber entered the kitchen timidly. Mark stood behind her, shoulders hunched, as if he were standing in a courtroom awaiting sentencing. I pulled out the letter I had written, the one about sacrifices, the one about raising a child alone. I placed it beside the photo. "You see those?" I asked quietly. "That is what motherhood looks like. That is what love looks like. And last night, when you spat on my plate, you spat on my decades of sacrifice. You spat on the very foundation that made Mark the man who married your daughter." She swallowed, visibly rattled now. "So here's what is going to happen. You will apologize to me directly, sincerely, and you will never treat me like that again, because if you do—" I glanced at Mark, then back at her. "I will walk away from this family completely. No visits, no holidays, no grandchildren, nothing." Mark gasped softly. "Mom!" "No," I said, not looking at him. "This is non-negotiable." Cynthia stared at me, her face struggling between pride and fear. Then slowly, very slowly, her shoulders fell. I'm sorry," she stuttered, voice weaker than I had ever heard. Amber's eyes widened. Mark exhaled shakily. Cynthia continued, this time with more clarity. "You didn't deserve that. I went too far. I apologize." I watched her carefully. For once, she meant it. Not because she respected me, yet, but because she realized she had underestimated me. "Thank you," I said simply. "Now we can move forward." I turned to Mark. "Your turn." He swallowed. "Mom, I'm sorry. Deeply. I don't know what got into me. She was trying to impress her family, and I was stupid. I forgot who I was. I forgot who you are, and I swear it won't happen again." This apology I accepted fully. I reached out, placed my hand on his cheek like I did when he was small, and smiled. "You're my son. I will always love you, but I will never let you forget where that love came from." Amber stepped forward, tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry too. I should have stopped my mom. I won't let anything like that happen again. I nodded. The truth was, none of them, not even Mark, expected me to confront them with dignity, strength, and calm power. They expected me to be silent. They expected me to accept humiliation. But that morning, they learned something important. I might be quiet, but I am not weak. And yet none of them, not even Mark, were prepared for what came next. Because what happened later that evening brought the entire family to tears.
After the confrontation in the kitchen, the house felt different. Quieter, humbled, almost fragile. Like everyone was finally seeing each other clearly for the first time. Cynthia sat at the table, silent for once. Amber hovered around nervously. Mark followed me with uncertain steps, as if afraid I'd disappear again. But I didn't stay long. I told them I needed space, time to breathe, and I left. The sky was bright and cold, the kind of crisp day that feels like it's washing everything clean. I drove home slowly, reflecting on what happened. I had defended my dignity, yes, but I didn't want the story to end with tension or bitterness. This family, my son's new life, deserved a lesson in unity, not division. And then, as I pulled into my driveway, I remembered something. Something small but powerful. A tradition I started when Mark was little. Whenever life felt heavy, whenever the world seemed too cruel or confusing, I would cook his favorite meal and tell him stories about strength, forgiveness, and family. He always said my stories made him feel grounded, safe, connected. Maybe it was time to use that same love to heal everyone involved. So that night, around 6 p.m., I cooked. Not just any meal, I made Mark's childhood favorite. Slow-roasted herb chicken, garlic potatoes, and the cornbread recipe he used to brag about in school. The house filled with warmth, with memories, with the scent of home after a long storm. I packed everything neatly into containers, wrapped it in a thick blanket, and placed it in a basket. Then I wrote a simple note. Family is not built through perfection. It is built through effort. After sunset, I drove back to their house. The windows glowed softly, shadows moving inside. I rang the doorbell, and Mark opened the door immediately, like he'd been waiting. "Mom," he asked, surprised. "I brought dinner," I said with a smile. He blinked several times, his voice cracking as he said, "You didn't have to do this." "I know, but sometimes the harder path is the right one." He stepped aside, letting me in. Amber and Cynthia were in the living room, both frozen in place when they saw the basket in my hands. The air felt heavy again, but softer, like everyone knew this moment mattered. "I'm not here to scold anyone," I said gently. "I'm here to remind all of us what family really means." I set the food on their dining table, the same table where I was humiliated just one night before, the same table where the cracks in our family were exposed. Cynthia swallowed hard, looking smaller than I had ever seen her. You
You cooked for us?" she asked. "Yes." She stared at the food, then at me. Her eyes glistened. "I don't deserve this." "Maybe not," I replied honestly. "But kindness isn't given to only those who deserve it." Amber covered her mouth, tears slipping down her cheeks. Mark rubbed his forehead, overwhelmed. Then slowly, something incredible happened. Cynthia stood up and walked toward me. She didn't posture. She didn't carry herself like royalty. She came with trembling hands and watery eyes. "I treated you terribly," she whispered. "I acted like I was above you. I acted cruel, and you brought us dinner." I nodded softly. Because cruelty breaks families, but forgiveness builds them. Cynthia broke down crying, quietly, unexpectedly, but sincerely. Amber hugged her mother, then hugged me. And Mark? Mark stood there staring at me like he was seeing his mother for the first time in years. I took his hand. "Son," I said softly, "you will lead your family one day. And the way you treat your mother is the way your children will treat you. Never forget that." His face crumpled. He pulled me into a tight hug, one filled with guilt, love, and something deeper, understanding. "I'm so sorry, Mom," he whispered into my shoulder. "I'll never let anyone disrespect you again, and I'll never disrespect you again either. You didn't deserve that. You never have." "I know, and I forgive you." We all sat down at the table, together. This time there was no tension, no superiority, no insults. Just four people who had crashed into a painful truth and were now rebuilding something better. As we ate, the room softened. Cynthia asked about Mark's childhood stories. Amber shared funny memories from their early dating days. Mark laughed. A real laugh. The kind he hadn't used in years. And for the first time, I saw a home forming. Not built on money or status, but on humility and love. Later that night, when I finally stood up to leave, Cynthia walked me to the door. She touched my arm gently. "You taught us something tonight. Not through anger, through grace. I'll never forget it." I smiled. "Just take care of him. And take care of each other." Mark hugged me again at the doorway, longer than before. "Mom, thank you for fighting for me instead of giving up on me." I brushed his hair back, like I did when he was little. "I raised you with love. I'll correct you with love too." As I walked back to my car, I felt lighter. Not because everything was perfect, but because healing had begun. And that night, my son finally understood. Dignity matters. Family matters. And a mother's strength, quiet.